Here's the wrong one. Look for the other ones.
No Briscoe tonight?
Well, I know you're priming the panel. Good evening. Welcome to the April meeting of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, Toronto Section. I am Reed Robertson, as you can see by my name tag, and hopefully most of you have your name tags. It's a little something that the governor visiting us from the Washington section about 2 months ago said that their meeting, they do pizza and pop, but they give everybody name tags, so everybody knows who everybody else is. Instead of, you know, hi guy, can't remember his name. No, I'm not talking about Dave.
Carl Putin.
Yeah.
It's Carl Putin.
I think it was, yeah. Yeah. So we figured we'd try it. Next month we'll get the ones that say, hello, my name is, a little larger, so they don't fall off as easily as this one, but just kind of like a last minute thing. Okay, wait. So this month we've got the NAB wrap up, as we always do, a week after NAB, so we have some fresh memories from our panel. I'll get to our panel after. But I'm here to talk about the next month's meeting will be on IPTV, and the meeting after in June will be the barbecue, which is the kickoff for the Boot Camp 6. Hi, Brad.
Hello, everybody.
Have a name tag?
A name tag. My name is Brad.
So you have this lovely poster that Brad designed here, motion media everywhere. There's extra copies of it available on the desk up there, talking about the boot camp this year, and the, of course, the kickoff barbecue. It's on June the 10th, and we're having it in a park.
Next to CBC.
Next to CBC,
East
yeah.
side of CBC.
I think we've been there before a few years ago, and we're also having a tour of CBC. No?
We're having a presentation.
Presentation, sorry, on the Olympic coverage they had this past February. We had 2 people come and speak to us about that, about some of the technical aspects of what CBC did over in Russia, yes. Sochi, Putin's event. Anyway, for our tech seminar, we're covering a lot of things: 4K, ultra high definition television, IP, internet delivery. It's all here. You can see about these little tablet-type gizmos in the front. And we also have a keynote speaker, it'll be Joel Walsh from SMPTE, to talk to us about SMPTE education and a lot of what's going on at head office. And we've lined up, I believe we have 17 papers so far. We have some sponsors so far, so if you'd like to sponsor, all the information is on here, so you can do it online. But as for registration, I believe it's being done through Eventbrite, as it was the last time, and I'm not sure if it's open yet. The person in charge of it was at the meeting tonight, but I think it is available online. So if you go to our website, SMPTE.org, Toronto Section, you'll find the information there. And with that, I'm going to toss it to tonight's moderator of our NAB wrap-up panel, Andrew Thomas.
Thanks, Reed. Well, thank you everybody for coming. So NAB has wrapped up. The turnaround time this year was pretty tight between the meeting, or the show and the meeting. So certainly appreciate our panelists, after spending time away from home, being able to come back to talk about it. So I'll introduce the 5 panelists. The plan is going to be each one of them is going to speak for roughly 10 to 15 minutes, just kind of about their observations from both a personal and professional perspective what was relevant to them. And then we're going to kind of throw it out to you, the audience, for questions. So, starting at the far end, we have Manny, whose last name I will avoid pronouncing. There we go.
Good. It's here, don't worry.
There we go. Manny is the system designer here at Ryerson at the Faculty of Communication and Design. And in his words, he's been here forever. So, next up we have Jim Morrison. Jim's been at Bell Media / Bell Networks for the last 6 years. He's the Director of Planning and Projects and Network. And prior to that, he spent another magical 6 years at the Director of Specialty Engineering Specialty Alliance Atlantis / Can West. And prior to that, 18 years the VP for Imagineering. And Eric is currently the Professor Coordinator at Loyalist College. Those that were here a month ago would have heard him speak about what he does there and what they do there. Prior to that, he was the director at ASCAN. And prior to that, he was the VP of Engineering for Can West, General Manager in 4 capacities at Sony, Engineering Manager at Dome, and the first Engineering Manager at TSN. Next up, we have Frank Bruno, who is currently the VP of Engineering at Rogers, broadcasting, I guess, overseeing the radio and television properties. He has seen a great amount of change during his career of 31 years, from 2-inch quad VTR to servers, from analog NTSC to HDSDI, from vacuum tubes to supercomputers, and much more. And finally, Paul Steckley, a man of few words, is the president of Applied Electronics, now in his 31st year, and he's also the membership vice president for SMPTE and a SMPTE fellow. So what I'm going to do, I'll start at the far end of the table, and Manny, if you would just take it away and just ramble for 10 to 15 minutes and tell us what you said.
Yeah. A couple things. Just to narrow it down, I guess, it would be 3 topics, 2 of which are kind of repeats from last year. They just kind of got more solidified this year. 4K was huge, again, this year. Cameras, switchers, all the entire production line was kind of falling into place slowly. 265, H265, which is the HEVC, the high efficiency video codec, was coming along really nicely. Talked to a bunch of vendors, and they all seem to say that HEVC for 4K was a little too young, but they were already looking at HEVC for 1080p, sort of broadcast kind of things. And then the other big thing that basically everybody was doing, everybody and their grandmother had OTT on their booths. So those of you who don't know, it's over the top, which is basically anything that's not on your cable, I guess, or cable or satellite. So Netflix, MyTV, there's a whole bunch of examples. Hulu, WWE Net, which just got announced. So most of these would be OTT. My sort of background being IT and being in the middle of IT and media, I looked at a bunch of infrastructure stuff for our own purposes. Also being involved in basically a global news network for students. I was also looking at low latency epic encoders to replace the ones we're using right now. And for various reasons, I've been always involved in digital cinema cameras from the research that we did in the center way back when. So I've been kind of going back and just visiting all the different manufacturers. So infrastructure-wise, saw a couple of really interesting things. Toshiba was showing their Exa Edge, which is an SSD-based streaming server, and it can also act as a cache server. So this is for the edge of the network where you're delivering to customers. And these guys could support an insane number of clients, 64,000 clients on a single 2 chassis, which is kind of interesting. They do basically standard HTTP streaming, so MPEG Dash or its various sort of flavors. They can do it. Fuji was showing, Fujifilm of all things, was showing a product called Eternity. I guess it's a rip-off of Eternity, I don't know, Digital Eternity, which is a tape library-based architecture that has a NAS front end. So which is really interesting from a point of view of having a nearline storage architecture that archives material, but have it accessible to applications at various stages. So if you wanted to edit a file that was sitting on tape, because the tape was actually had a file system on it, you could actually just open the file on the NAS server, and the application would respond, going through its gyration, trying to open the file, and then the tape would kind of catch up to it eventually and send it the actual data. And one other thing I saw, which was kind of interesting, also at Toshiba, I think it's because Toshiba provides their memory for them or something like that, was the Violin, it's a company called Violin Memory. Violin Memory was showing their Violin Memory 6000 flash memory array, which they claim to be the fastest memory array in use right now at the lowest price, supposedly. 1 million IOPS, microsecond latencies is their, I guess, slogan. Low latency stuff, there was a lot. The three things that kind of stood out, there was a card, PCI Express card from Deck Tech. They just announced it. It's the DTA 2180, which had basically, I think it was 150 millisecond latency. And it was basically HDMI or HD SDIN. It would spit out ASI, and you could basically get a digital version of whatever you inputted as well. Nimbus, as a Korean company, was showing basically encoder, decoder, transmitter, receiver that was doing 40 milliseconds, which was really interesting for really, really cheap. It was like $4,000 for a pair. And then what else we had? We had Comrex, which was doing live shots. These are sort of like, I guess, Vigero-like devices that are in hardware. They were doing stuff at about 100 to 150 milliseconds over Ethernet, not over wireless. Wireless was a little more. Digital cinema cameras, a whole bunch of them. Most interesting one, actually, was, believe it or not, the Bolex. Bolex company released a 16mm black and white digital camera. It's really cute. It's almost battery powered, but it looks like the old Bolex. It's got the handle on it and everything. The cool thing about it was that it actually uses a Kodak black and white sensor. So not have to worry about Bayer, debayering, and all that stuff. It records raw, as in like full, I guess, TIFFs in this case, which was kind of neat. Aja was showing their Scion camera, brand new, not available yet, which is supposed to be affordable at around 10K, less than 10K they said. And of course Blackmagic, every year they have to have a new camera. There was the Ursa, which is their new sort of above the digital cinema camera, but below a red camera, I guess. It can take the abuse, but not as much as the red. That's what everybody kept telling me. They were going about $6,500, and they also announced their new Studio Cam, which was interesting. The Studio Cam, the cool thing about it is if you actually sell your soul to Blackmagic and buy their ATEM switcher, apparently you can do color syncing by the ATEM switcher right off the monitor, so you can have a bunch of these cameras in the studio. And because they're all fed via fiber from the ATEM switcher, you can do all sorts of, calibration, color calibration and syncing and stuff using the ATEM switcher. And that basically came in two flavors, HD or 4K. HD was apparently available now, 4K was supposed to come. Anyways, what else do we have? We had, of course, the NHK guys were there to blow us away yet again with an 8K camera, which is the size of, it's literally this big. It's called the NHK 8KQ. They were showing footage of that going into a massive box, almost the size of this table, which was the recorder. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, that's about it. There's a couple other things that I saw that were kind of interesting, but they're not really relevant. There's a company, Renew, no, underneath Vision. The company is called Vision 3 Imaging. They're from what I was told, they're from a military background. They used to develop stuff for the military. And what they've done is they demonstrated a parallax scan imagery with it. They have a system called the Real Shot Parallax Induction Technology. And what it is basically, if you can imagine a box sitting between the lens and the camera with a rotating aperture inside. And I don't understand the science of it exactly, but basically what happens is that once the film is produced using a single camera, a single lens, once you play it back, you get about 80%, and they have demos of this stuff, which is really cool. You get about 80% of the 3D effect that you get with two cameras out of a single camera. So you kind of have that feeling of, okay, there's depth there, and there's, you know, things in front and things in the background kind of thing. Things don't jump at you out of the screen, obviously. But yeah, it was kind of a neat system. And apparently, even if you film it, the effect kind of translates. So that was kind of neat. And I think that's where I'm going to stop and pass on the baton.
Great. Thanks, Manny. Over to you, Tim.
Well, hi everyone. I want to journey back in time a bit. It was the late 80s, and when I gave my first SMPTE presentation. At the time, the topic was general purpose computers versus purpose-built hardware and broadcasting. The buzz at that time was the trend or evolution of migrating like CGs and 3D animation platforms from hardware to software. Okay? The benchmark CG at the time was the Quantel Paint Box, a perfect example of a piece of hardware that you needed to do a software upgrade and involved a dumpster at the time. So that's what the topic was back then. I still have the transparencies from that meeting. I would present them tonight. But I believe a lot of the trends we talked about then are still current today. So what I'm going to touch upon, is the buzz from this year's NAB. To me, I'm not going to get necessarily into the neat little toys, but in terms of the trends I've observed, there's some excitement this year around the use of, again, commodity computing and network platforms, right? And we can't ignore that because there's definitely a cost advantage to using those solutions in our environment. But again, as in the 80s, there is still a place for purpose-built hardware, right? The main advantage to purpose-built hardware is, of course, it offers a niche product for the maker, and there's obviously potential market advantages in the products. I was at one vendor who was listen to, the top guy in the company was talking about the fact that they're moving to purpose-built hardware, they're discontinuing the use of, they're moving to commodity-based computing and network platforms, and they're going to basically abandon their custom-built hardware. And the first demo I saw was custom-made hardware, and the guy was saying, no way it's up there. So there seems to be a trend one way, and the reality is something slightly different. So some other observations based on my 28th year of NAB. There's still too much meat. Yes. You still need comfy shoes. You still smoking buildings down there, and there's no. So getting back to the trends. General purpose computing, storage, networks, and software apps. That's one of the trends I saw. There's a lot of focus on using blade surfers, virtualization on demand. The virtualization software is now running natively on the hardware. There's no operating systems involved. example of such a platform is from Cisco. They basically sell a platform called their Unified Computing System, which is blade or rack mount servers, integrated 10-gig fabric switches, fiber channel Ethernet if you want, built-in management, virtual SAN technology, and a platform Azure application. Again, Cisco also offered another platform known as their mezzanine processor, which is a general purpose processor. It's a rack mount, not a rack mount, it's a blade mount piece of hardware with 10 gig and video I/O capability. So they basically have 8 SFP ports, and they're manufacturing video and network I/Os. Plug them in on an as-needed basis. And Cisco was the only company that actually stated that their 12G SDI modules that they're going to be developing with the standards. Unfortunately, the standard reference, I couldn't find any reference on the planet of what it was. So it's like, I don't know, if someone here from SMPTE knows what 2082 is? I can find 2036 and a whole bunch of others, but I can't find 2082.
What actually was the standard for?
For 12 gig SDI.
Oh, SMPTE is redoing the SDI standard, which gets groans of delight from everybody we mentioned it to. They're going to come out with the 6 and the 12 will be finalized very, very soon, and the 24 in about another year when the components are available for testing. So
They're the only ones that actually,
SDI
they're the only
standard.
ones that committed to a standard, and which is interesting. If you referenced the wrong number, but this is a standard. On the same lights of talking about general purpose computing, there's also general purpose networking and general purpose storage. So, you know, another company that, you know, that's found a lot of application in broadcast is Isilon, and Isilon is, you know, basically found OEM applications in Grass Valley, Ebert, CBS, Ericsson, Adobe, Montel, Magic Communications, Harrison, so there's a large spread of this type of hardware into the broadcasting realm. Virtualization and the cloud seems to be another trend that applies this year as well. And the enablers there, again, are the general purpose computers, multiple CPU capability. 10 gig networks are very affordable now. So, you know, you can buy a 10 gig network card and I/O for a couple $1,000 less nowadays for servers. Other buzzwords that are mentioned are software-defined networks. Some people also refer to them as software-defined video networks. Network function virtualization, software-defined workflows, basically processor storage on demand. Two companies that have applications in that world was HP. HP has a product that we're looking at as a virtually defined content distribution network, or CDN. So basically it's they using their blade and storage technology, they can build and tear down CDN functionality on demand. So depending on your video requirements, your load, you can distribute your virtualized storage in your server environment. HP was also talking about, they're one of many vendors that were talking about network PBRs. So rather than having local storage in the home, they're talking about pieces of shareable network in the cloud. So that's another topic that's come up in this interaction too. Some of the BDUs. The Magic Communications was showing a concept. Basically another software-defined workflow, which was basically their Versio storage and master control server in a box, and they were virtualizing it into Amazon servers in the cloud. So basically, with the servers, you get the network, the storage, rent a master environment, basically. I don't know how to get into the video. That's one concept they were showing. Again, another enabler in this environment is basically IP workflows, IP everywhere. So, you know, as you're mentioning, there's streaming, OTT, which is basically converting video to IP. So, another concept that's been shown this year as well is you rather than having core networks in terms of baseband, we're looking at using IP-based network infrastructure with video on the edge. So basically, it's conversion on the edge, switching and virtual video router core. Examples of that was, you know, Everett's EXE and IPX product. They basically built a very high switching fabric that's IP-centric. To them, they decided to build it themselves because they didn't trust that the non-deterministic nature of off-the-shelf network infrastructure. On the flip side, Cisco and Snell were showing their concept of using Cisco hardware and Snell conversion gear on the edge to do the same type of concept, basically building a virtual router environment using IP layer 2 and 4. Another interesting product I saw, which happened to be the Cisco box, it's got nothing to do with the lab, but rather interesting, is a box from StageBox, a little interface card from StageBox. And it's a camera adapter that allows you to do HD, audio, Genlock, time code, Kali, talkback over 100 megabit link. And the Cisco was showing you wireless adapter. So you can remote camera, all the time, locked in StageBox. Again, HEVC, encode, transcode, HEVC, H.265 is basically available, readily available, close to being readily available for SD and HD today, using existing hardware. 4K is coming. So 4K low frame rate, 2430 is probably available, but high frame rate is coming later this year. Cisco Harris Elemental shows up. And 4K. 4K is the buzzword and the product we're pushing to replace 3D. As mentioned, Blackmagic has several products, and I found it very coincidental that their cameras and their switchers are also 4K in price. Very coincidental. Panasonic introduced a new 4K camera for film, a Vericam HS camera, which records raw, HD, 2K, 4K, Ultra HD up to 120 frames per second. And I also found it very interesting. I asked them, well, aren't you going to introduce a broadcast camera? This is a film camera. And they said, well, go around the booth and look at the Lumix SLR. That's their broadcast offering. Basically, a Lumix SLR product. It was an interesting product because it actually came with an interface unit for 3K giant. So there you go. Sony had a similar offering using their Alpha 7S camera. Sony also has their F55 and F65 4K film cameras, which offers a studio kit to make it like a broadcast camera. And one interesting feature they have introduced this year is the ability to do the pan and scan HD output in the camera itself without having to have an external box. JVC introduced 3 4K cameras, one box, one handheld, and an EAG style camera. The EAG style uses PL mount build type camera lenses, the other two use micro four thirds lenses. Again, prices are ranging $6,000 to $20,000 plus lenses plus options. GoPro had a 4K Hero 3 Plus, which was an interesting camera at $39.99.99 kind of 4K-ish. Another interesting company was Atmos Shogun. They had a 4K recorder monitor, which was a very interesting device. ORAD showed a 4K Mini Master, so basically they took one of the graphics platforms and they had full-up master control functionality back in the box. 4K, 4A had a full 4K ecosystem. Cisco showed a software-only product called VideoScape MiniRes Encode Cluster. So they basically use general purpose computing to encode 4K at 60 frames per second. It's a concept, but it was showing an output stream of 17 to 20 megabits per second. Can't buy it now, but they expect to productize it by the end of the year. Elemental showed a 2 chassis solution. So they have 1 or 2 rack units, basically GPU assisted encoding product, which we actually have third or fourth argument. And what they do is they can tie 2 of the Elemental encoders together. They can do 2 inputs each, and they can do real-time 4K 70 megabit encoding. Encoders you can buy today, right? So that's something that's very interesting to show. Again, in terms of the problem with 4K is we can encode it, we can send it out, but how do you watch it on the other end? You can watch it over OTT today, but there's no set-top. There's no set-top box technology available to watch it as of yet. There seemed to be only one manufacturer which showed up in a lot of the booths, called VIXS. They were branded a lot of numbers, and they were showing 4K 60p set-top box. I don't think it's memorable, but they've shown as a concept. And again, going back to the I/O, I asked a lot of the manufacturers about what standards are you going to adhere to for a single interface for 4K, and half the people didn't understand the question. Standard was that. The only exception was, I guess, it was Blackmagic. Blackmagic actually had an optical I/O for 12G, but the SMPTEs were deliverable and couldn't actually show it in the show, so we had a slot for it. And two chip manufacturers, MACOM and SMPTEE, were showing 12G silicon. The MACOM engineers asked, "Who's your main character?" Answer. Who's the answer? Blackmagic. So there was 4K production switches, of course. Basically, 3G, HD, half the number of inputs and outputs by a factor of 4. Try to do things like 4K as best you can. So in closing, as it was during my first presentation back in the 80s, I still see a trend towards commodity-based computing platforms, but adding on to them now with storage and networking as well. But there's still always be a home for purpose-built hardware.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Over to Eric.
I guess I couldn't start off without talking a little bit about consolidation. The Grass Valley booth was in the South Hall on the lower level. And when I walked in there, was, in a corner, there was a bunch of folks from Belden looking kind of awkward, and they had their little display board with some cables on it. So I thought, the cable business must be really good, because you're off selling all this cable and you bought two companies, and really the Miranda name had disappeared because of acquisition as well. So that was I think an eye-opener at the show. I want to take a kind of a different approach. Jim's done a great job, and so has Manny, in detailing the hardware. And is 4K in evidence? Well, obviously 4K was everywhere, and you can shoot it, edit it, produce it. But as Jim pointed out, currently we don't have a way to get it to the home viewer. So to me, really the race is on as to how do we deliver it to the home. And I think nothing put a bigger exclamation point on that but the NHK display, where they were using a single UHF channel to deliver an 8K picture. So one of the questions one might ask is, as Paul has said in the past, the paint's just dry on HD. Here we are talking about a new standard. And is 4K enough? I think was really the question for me. I had the opportunity to sit through some of the engineering papers on Saturday and Sunday. And so there was a whole session on ATSC version 3, which I'll get to in a moment. One of the things that struck me too, and it was probably a small thing, but there was a proliferation of gimbal mounts for camera devices. They were just everywhere, from the type that were hung from a string in front of you with a back mount that would hold the camera to obviously gimbal mounts that would mount to UAVs. And I think, as someone estimated, something like 30 wars raging right now on the planet. And if you were going to cover one as a news team, would it make sense to use a UAV rather than sending somebody into harm's way? So I think that whole market was exploding at the show, and for good reason. The price point has come down a long way. These unmanned aerial vehicles are all going to be cheap. They can hold a fair amount of weight. I saw one that was capable of 160 pounds, and the young lady that was demonstrating it was talking about how she wanted to get on and ride it. So maybe that won't happen, but certainly high-quality cameras, taking them into harm's way is very possible. So, and everybody's saying, yeah, 4K is a great technology, and it's only for production. How many times have we heard that? Well, the rallying cry for producers making content for a long time has been that source quality is very important. So I get the 4K thing, and 8K is even going to be better quality. However, file sizes are going to be huge. But it all makes sense in that arena. Now, we add to that the NHK development, which says that we can take a single UHF channel and using 4096 QAM, we can actually deliver over 90 megabits of data to the end user. That's pretty stunning. And sound, I believe, was 22.2, if I remember correctly. One of the terms in one of the papers I was in there, we are no longer living in a surround sound environment. Now we're in an immersive sound environment. It's not enough that we have 7 speakers in our viewing environment. We now need them in the ceiling and the floor and everywhere else. So that was the real trend. But I do think that the over-the-top thing, everybody's treating that as kind of an add-on. One of the specs that I got from the show was that Netflix is responsible for a full 1/3 of network traffic in the U.S. during prime time today. I don't think it's an add-on anymore. I think that's the competition. And I think if Netflix is able to do live sports, which they've talked about, traditional broadcasters are in big trouble. Their model is such that they don't have to supply set-top boxes. They don't have to buy transmission infrastructure because it exists already. And in fact, if you don't get Netflix properly, who are you going to complain to? Your ISP and complain you don't have enough bandwidth. It has nothing to do with them. So their costs are very low, and they're just going to keep pushing better and better content at us. 4K may be a bit of a stretch, but that's today. So along the lines of the ATSC version 3 thing, this standard which has been proposed, it isn't complete. It won't be complete until 2015. And it will be not backwards compatible with version 2 and version 1. So, which really means we're going to have a new generation of TVs that will receive it. However, they have the right partners to start with, so companies like Samsung, Sony, and LG and the American networks are involved. And so I think the process is a good one. They're actually listening and they're getting, I think, it all right. They're leaving it as an open, flexible standard that can expand with time, so that's a good thing. There are some huge risks. First of all, I would have to say that ATSC as it is now, and mobile handheld in particular, you would have to view as a failure. And why? Because for about 5-6 years we've been talking about there's going to be a generation of smartphones that have an ATSC chipset in them, and it just frankly hasn't happened to the degree where anybody in this room could receive an ATSC reception on their smartphone. So that's a big problem. If it were a case of downloading an app from the App Store, that might be a different story. So that's certainly the way we're going to have to go with ATSC. What do we know so far? We know that broadcasters in the US and Canada have all been forced into putting up ATSC transmitters. The numbers in the US right now say that we have about 8% of Americans that are watching over-the-air television. And NAB, of course, riles when those numbers come out because they would like to think that they're higher, than maybe 10%. But in any case, it says that over 90% of your viewers are not using over-the-air technology. So there is a motion afoot in the U.S. to give back the entire UHF ban. One of the impediments to that is that Canada and Mexico are not about to go that way. So all the border cities are going to be faced with Canada's pumping out signals in that spectrum. So that's going to be an impediment. Also, the viewing numbers in the U.S. say that 28% of Americans get some content via the internet today. So here we are saying we got 30% are already started down this IT path. Can it be long before the IT side of it takes over? That would be my question. Version 3 looks like it will most certainly use high efficiency video coding and likely AC4, and there was a booth that had a demonstration of AC4, which is the successor to AC3, and they were demonstrating 384 kilobits, and then AC4 was 96 kilobits, and they encourage you to put a headset on and listen to the two and try and tell the difference. And to my ear, they sounded pretty similar. I understand that AC4 also has some loudness correction built into it as well. Add to that in Canada, probably in the US, there is a move afoot for people to so-called cut the cable. And this is probably more driven by the younger generation who are quite happy to go and find the content, download it, and watch it at their leisure when they want to. And so they don't see the need to have a cable or satellite hookup. So I think there's a real risk for traditional broadcasters. If traditional broadcasters sit back and say, you know, we're pretty happy with our business, we're getting our $100 a month for cable service, well, I would think, again, you're going to have to, at some point, deliver better quality pictures to the end user without commercials. And so that, to me, is the race that's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. It's good that we have a couple of broadcasters right here. So can the over-the-air service be marketed to consumers based on a perceived quality difference? If we were marketing ATSC version 3 as UHD TV or something, and then right now it's a well-kept secret. Probably the people in this room have experienced the difference on a Maple Leaf hockey game from what you get over cable to what you get over off air. Is there a way that
Still lose.
Yeah, if you want to see them lose better quality, then. So, but the other issue is, I think, with ATSC is, are we ever going to address the mobile phone market with that technology? So that's a good question. I don't have the answer to that one. And ATSC version 3 also has this concept of a back channel, which is great, meaning that if you want to talk back and send your data back, you're going to have to use an IP connection. And does that kind of, is that IP connection eventually going to take over in the end anyway? So, and then one other paper that I attended was the HD radio paper. And out in Canada, the background is that I guess with IBOC, in-band on-channel on AM stations, what we found was that there was co-channel interference. So we were very cautious, because we're Canadians, right? We were very cautious to say, oh, that's just never going to work. The U.S. have taken a very different approach, and they're just bashing ahead. And their attitude is, if we get noise on the analog, too bad, listen to the digital. And if I don't get the coverage that I expected, well, then just up the power, because, and that was one of the latest revisions they made to their standard. The salient fact, however, is in the U.S., 1 out of every 2 vehicles delivered today comes with HD radio. You cannot escape those facts. And why it is we don't have HD radio, I'm hoping Frank can answer this, but I don't want to put him on the spot too much. But I think Canada should be ready for HD radio, and for those companies that have AM radio channels, it could be a real gold mine, because you can now transmit 2 CD quality channels over what was a really bad quality AM station. So I think that's about it for me.
Thanks, Eric.